All right, welcome everybody. I'm Dr. Lani Cupchoy. We are here at Chapman University. This is Education 570, Pedagogies for Social Change. And this is day 2, right, of our lesson plan presentations. And students in this class, they are working on their master's teaching credential, right, K-12 education. And it ranges from elementary to high school. And so some students, half of the class is interested in working in elementary and the other half is interested in working in high school. So this assignment and what you're going to see are actually presentations where students had to design a social justice-based lesson plan, right? And that is kind of helping us to think about how we can challenge, how we reimagine traditional curriculum, right? As educators, what can we do? What kind of philosophies, right? And also how can we support specific, maybe vulnerable populations? It could be in special needs, special education, you know, from other works like, you know, addressing racism, sexism, classism, right? All the isms, etc. Right? So this is what you're going to see, what you're about to see are works by students who have been thinking about that, right? Thinking about how they can reimagine, right, pedagogy that's a lot more culturally relevant to students, to the different students that they're planning to work with in school districts. So without further ado, what I'd like to do is I'm gonna go ahead and introduce our first speaker, which is Kaylin.
Hello, everyone. Let me share my screen. All right. So today I'll be presenting my lesson plan on music and social justice. So to start, I'll give a brief description of my lesson. The title is Music and Civil Rights, and it's geared towards high schoolers from 9th to 12th grade. The lesson is meant for an instrumental ensemble, so band or orchestra, but it can be geared towards choir as well. And in order to fulfill the virtual component of the lesson, the students will be engaging in an online research project. So the inspiration or the reason why I decided to discuss music and civil rights and have a research-based project is because there is a lack of diversity in music, especially when talking about classical music. Many times, music is seen as a cisgender, male-dominated field that requires financial wealth in order to succeed. This can be seen through the elitism of conservatories, expenses of instruments, and the white male-dominated professional orchestras. And so this project will break these stereotypes of race, class, gender, and sexuality in music. And it will allow students to see themselves in music and know that they have a place in it. So in order for students to see themselves in music, they need to feel connected to the topic at hand. And this is where the opening activity of my lesson comes in. So for the opening activity, students will discuss what music is the most important to them and why. This will give students an opportunity to think about what resonates with them and how music has played an important role in their lives. This will provide a foundation for the students' projects going forward. So during the practice of my lesson, I focused on this opening activity and an introduction to the project. One of the members in our group related to one of her favorite genres, which was Motown, to civil rights movements. And she was able to connect a passion of hers to the project. So if we were to research the topic further, if it was an actual class, I'm sure a great project would have come out of it. And this really confirmed my hope for the opening activity, that it would create a personal connection to the project. So for how this lesson will be taught, it would be one part of a larger unit. The lesson will begin with the opening activity and go into a teacher presentation from there. The presentation will give an overview of civil rights in music and its importance, along with some examples. And the students will then be introduced to the project, which focuses on group research. This lesson will be on the first day of that the project is introduced to the class. And there will be one more day that students are able to work on the project in class, which will be near the end of the unit. And all other research will be done outside of the class. So going into the project, here I've listed the requirements of the project. The students will be introducing their topic and why they chose it. They'll be talking about the history of the topic, what civil rights issue it addresses, an example of the music, so a recording of it and its history as well, along with the most crucial piece of the project, which is an action statement that explains how the students will move forward with the knowledge that they have learned. And so that relates into the social justice pedagogy goals. So I listed the 3 social justice standards that are addressed in this lesson. The first is diversity standard 8. So this standard is fulfilled through the students' curiosity and choice in their research topic. They will be researching the lived experiences of musicians who contributed to civil rights movements. The second is Justice Standard 13, which will be discussed through the students' research projects. And the last one is Acting Standard 20, which is fulfilled through the students' action statement at the end of their project. So a lot of these social justice standards are addressed through this project, and that's why it's so important to have this kind of activity that the students can participate in, especially in their music classes. And so here is a screenshot of my lesson plan with all the things that I've talked about so far. And that is all from me.
All right, snaps. Thank you so much, Kaylin. Wonderful, wonderful presentation. Excellent. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to our next presenter, which is Allison.
Oops. Can you guys see my screen? Yes. Okay, perfect. I just want to make sure it's working because of the messy Wi-Fi this morning. Okay, so my presentation or my lesson plan is going to be surrounding gender roles and stereotypes. So here's just a little brief overview of my lesson plan. I just put a little part of it. It's going to be surrounding 5th graders. It's going to be a 2-day lesson plan, and then I'm going to front load the lessons with a little bit of understanding on gender stereotypes, gender roles, and LGBTQ plus understandings. So I'm just going to let you guys look at it for like 2 seconds, but okay, so in the first day of my lesson plan, it's going to be a 55 first day lesson plan. So we're going to be reading through the class. We're going to do a read aloud called Jack, Not Jackie, where the Jack is this little boy who decides to become transgender through his time as a child. So it follows his journey and then also follows his sister's journey and acceptance. And then after that, we're going to go over a little presentation, and then we're going to do a toy ad identification word sort of thing, where it would be, they're going to be identifying the gender characteristics in toy ads, and then identifying why they believe those are the specific gender characteristics that come with that toy. And then we're going to facilitate group discussion by asking if there's any typical girl toys that have similarities, what about the boys, and if they notice any similarities between the two, to facilitate discussion and create understanding of gender roles and gender stereotypes in general. And then day 2, we're going to start with our virtual fieldwork. We're going to showcase a YouTube video surrounding gender roles. I was going to show a minute of it just so you guys could get a understanding of it really fast.
Okay, so we have to get you a sword, a shield, blue pants. Oh, and Middle Eastern role stereotypes are when a person is expected to act in a certain way based on society's expectations related to their gender. Traditional gender roles go back to a time when there were clear and, at times, unequal rules about how people were expected to act based on their gender. People who were born male were
Okay, I didn't want to show too much because I don't want to take up too much time because there's a lot of people that have to go today, but you can kind of see just the general idea of what they would be looking at. They'd be understanding gender roles in terms of not necessarily toy ads this time. And then we'd be creating a group discussion where they look at stereotypical female roles in society, especially in their current community, so they can connect it to their own community. And then how has it changed over the past century? So they're connecting it to past research and past knowledge. And then as an exit ticket, I'd have them create each a post-it note and put it out on the board that says, what is this one stereotype in gender that you wish you could have changed? And then,
okay, so we have to get you a sword.
Sorry. And then during my lesson plan execution, you could see all of us right here. I just had them look through the video, and then they went through the discussion with me in terms of the gender stereotypes and things that they have had seen in the in their world and their society. They did a really good job, gave me some good feedback. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. And let's move on to our next presenter, which is Alicia.
Hello, everyone can see this? Yeah, okay. So my lesson plan project is centered on teaching children to take care of their emotions. My inspiration for this project is from personal and also just like professional observations that mental health isn't really addressed very much in K through 12, if at all. And I think that it's really unfortunate that that's the case, and especially because mental health problems can have such an influence in academic performance. And if we want to support our students in that way, we should be addressing them as people and their emotions as well. So this is just one statistic that I found, which is really kind of shocking, and it shows you the gravity of the situation at times. So my guiding question is, how do we take care of all of our emotions? And I put the emphasis on all of our emotions because I think it's important that children understand that they aren't only supposed to be happy all the time. That's not how life works. And this is for second graders, but it can be, of course, modified based on whatever grade you're working with. I'm also going to be addressing stereotypes associated with gender and emotional expression, how they can take care of themselves as children, and just give them the opportunity to personally reflect on how they experience and manage their own emotions. These are two of the content standards that I'm going to be working with. And then here is a couple of pictures of my lesson plan. So I'm going to hop back and forth between this slide and this slide to kind of explain. So it's going to be taught over the course of 2 days, but I want to have refreshers and check-ins throughout the school year, since I don't think this is something that can be taught just once. It needs to be revisited since it's always at play. Like I said, there's going to be opportunity for personal reflection, and this will come in when students are watching a video. It's called A Little Spot of Feelings. It goes over all of the different emotions, from feeling peaceful to feeling sad and angry. And then after we go through each emotion, I'll have them engage in self-reflection using prompts, and I want to give them the opportunity to journal or draw, however they feel best allows them to express themselves. And this is what I did in my mock lesson. So I had them watch just a short clip of a time or the peaceful component of that video, and then share out on a Padlet about a time when they felt peaceful. And I received some feedback that it was nice to kind of share out anonymously in this way and also view their classmates' responses. And then I personally realized that it would be beneficial if I shared my own experiences with emotions, so that I can engage in a form of modeling in that way. So there's going to be group discussions. I also will have a read aloud and different video activities throughout the lesson of In My Heart. That's a book that is very similar to A Little Spot of Feelings. And then my virtual fieldwork component is going to be having students watching self-care for kids at home. I want them to engage with their community and then kind of bring that conversation back to the classroom the next day, so that what we learn in the classroom can be extended and applied to their home life and their culture in whatever way that is. And after that, I would have them come up with a few strategies or things that they discussed with their communities and mention those in class the next day, with the goal of creating a class list of what we can do to help each other take care of our emotions, so that we are practicing what we are learning. My social pedagogy goals are basically that I think wellness for diverse communities is restorative justice in and of itself. And by doing that, we can uplift minority groups by giving them the power to care for themselves, and also examining gender stereotypes surrounding emotions allows us to address sexism that exists very prevalently in our society, and also giving children the opportunity to move away from the gender binary. So that is my presentation. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Alicia. Snaps, really appreciate it. Okay, and let's move on to Rhea. You're up.
Awesome. Alrighty, so this is my social justice lesson plan for this class. So I decided I was going to focus on a particular topic, which was the Mendez versus Westminster Court case and what kind of came out of that. So there are three main elements to my lesson plan. The first is that this lesson plan is actually split up over 3 different days. And then sorry. Is the screen still zoomed in? Are you guys? Interesting. Hold on one quick moment. Sorry about that. Is it better? Okay. Alrighty. So there are 3 main components to this lesson. The first is that it is split up over 3 different days. Each day we do a small portion of the read aloud, and then the students go home and then do a brief assignment about the story that they've read so far. The second part of this lesson is designed with 3rd graders in mind as the audience. I specifically do want to teach K through 3, specifically 2nd or 3rd. So, and then the last part of this lesson is that this lesson is heavily focused on group discussion and then whole class discussion as well. So there are 3 main components to the lesson besides those. So the first is a pre-assessment background knowledge activity where I will ask students questions such as what images come to mind when you hear the word like justice, or when you hear the word equality and segregation. And also like what kind of feelings does come out when you hear those words is another type of question I would ask. Second is the read aloud, which is based on a book, Separate is Never Equal by Duncan Toniuth. I believe that's how you pronounce his name, which tells the Mendez versus Westminster story. And while reading, I will stop at many points and ask critical thinking questions such as, what do we learn about the effects of segregation from the education specialists who testified in the trial, based on what the book was, what the book said. And then the third and final part is the virtual fieldwork, which is to watch a video through Edpuzzle, which is interviews of different members of the Mendez family talking about their own experience through the entire trial and how. And then the Edpuzzle allows me to stop them and stop at different points and ask questions for comprehension and critical thinking. So the inspiration for this lesson comes from a class that we took earlier in the semester. And I decided to do a lesson on Mendez versus Westminster court case because I unfortunately only learned about it this year. And I feel like that is something that is extremely, that was hurtful in a way, only because I've only ever heard about Brown versus Board of Education. However, this happened prior to that. And I feel like especially somebody who wants to work within Orange County, this is something that would be really important for students to learn. So for the practice, I decided to run the pre-assessment activity where I asked them what they thought when they heard the word segregation, equality, or justice, what they think they meant, images that may come to mind. And overall, it went really well. The main feedback given back was that the words may be a bit challenging for 3rd graders to understand, but my classmates indicated to me that the opening activity would nonetheless be beneficial to the overall understanding of the book and the lesson. And so for the social justice pedagogy goals, it hits this one really hard point, really poignantly, which is I know about the actions of people and groups who have worked throughout history to bring more justice and fairness to the world. So this really does hit, especially, it's not just the social justice, but also I have these other, the literature standard and then the history standard, which is specifically about a personal community that somebody lives in. So this really does hit home with Orange County, being that this did occur within Orange County. And then finally, the students' performance task at the very end of all of this over the days is they will either work in a partner or on their own, and they will write a We Are poem about Orange County, which will then, they will also represent it with also an image, a comic strip, a picture, story, some way that they can share with the rest of the class. Thank you.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much, Ray. Appreciate it. And yes, Mendez versus Westminster is huge, right? For Orange County folks, huge. Or at least it should be, if it isn't already. Okay, let's go to our next presenter, which is Martin.
Hi everyone. So this is my lesson plan project, and here's a screenshot of my lesson plan. And so the whole idea that I'm trying to reach out to my students is that I want to teach them about the internment of Jewish people, and then lead it to the Japanese people and the kids on the U.S. and Mexico border. And so here are the standards that I want to be addressing. So students will analyze America's participation in World War II. I relate to all people as individuals rather than representatives of groups, and can identify stereotypes when I see or hear them. And I can recognize, describe, and distinguish unfairness and injustice at different levels of society. And my virtual fieldwork is like it's like an online museum. So the actual museum is in Washington, D.C., and it's like a Holocaust museum. And the intended audience for my lesson are 11th graders taking U.S. history. And I believe that it could be altered to be taught in world history classes in the 9th and 10th grade levels. But I feel that it is more appropriate at the 11th grade because these students are more mature and this is a heavy topic. So I feel like they would appreciate it a lot more. And here's like some screenshots. And what's cool is that some of these photos are taken with the 360-degree cameras. So you can always like drag it around, and it's kind of like you're standing there because, like, you know, with COVID and everything, like you can't be there. Well, it might be open now that things are opening up, but like if you're doing it online, this is like a pretty cool alternative. And here are some more photos, and like there's a bunch of photos like kind of like spread all around the whole like online museum. And I think it's pretty cool because like these photos, like it just has such like a deep meaning, like you wouldn't see outside. And how would I teach it? So my ideal classroom setting is that like these kids are already like broken up into groups beforehand at the beginning of the year. Like they're kind of in their quadrants, so they know like when we do group work, they know like who's gonna be in their group. So the first 5 minutes, I would like show them how to browse the activity and then break them into groups. And the next 25 minutes, I'll allow them free time to browse it. But before I do that, I would make sure to show them 2 to 3 segments and kind of like guide them through their thinking. So I would help them like model like, oh, like here's what like you should be thinking about, how I want you to kind of see things. And then I would just like let them like look around and like, so like, because like they already saw how I modeled it, like they know like what's expected of them. And after that, the 10 minutes later, we have them like get back together in their little groups, and they get a chance to talk about it and like kind of bounce their ideas off of each other. And then like towards the end of those 10 minutes, we'll have like a group discussion with the whole class. So like they can continue to like share their ideas and like keep building off of each other. And 8:40 to 8:45, I'll link it to like the internment of like Japanese people and the containment of children on the US and Mexico border, because the whole idea is that like they're targeting a certain demographic. And this is like, it's kind of unfair. So like, I kind of like want to like get them to like think about like what's wrong and like how they all kind of connect. And then in the last 5 minutes of class, I want to give them like an exit slip. So they can, so I would like ask them like, oh, so like, how did this make you feel? What did you see? What stuck out to you? And I think that it's important because like writing your thoughts down and like kind of like putting it on paper, it like makes it more like, it gives you like a stronger foundation of like what you're like thinking about. So I feel like it'd be pretty meaningful for them to like write it down, and like it would help me see like where like my students are and like what they're thinking about. And changes I made to this lesson plan. So I was inspired by Braden's lesson plan where he included group work, because before I would just kind of just like let them do their own thing, like think about it themselves. But I realized that the most meaningful conversations are like done through like with your group mates. And then Cassidy and Monica also suggested that I would like model the thinking so that it would like kind of be like less overwhelming, because I realized afterwards that if I just like kind of just give it to them and like let them like roam around, like they're not gonna know like what to look for. So I figured like this is the best way to make sure like I get what I want, and like they can like know like what's expected, so they won't like just to look, but they're actually like absorbing and like retaining like what I want them to like get from this lesson. And this achieves social justice pedagogy goals by like exposing them to these things, because I know when I was younger, like I wasn't like being exposed. I wasn't looking for things to like kind of like challenge like my like status quo. So I felt that by exposing these things to them, it lets them like kind of like get into like the activist mindset early. Because I know like when I was younger, like I wasn't like doing all I could to like better the world. And then I was just like looking here how all the Jewish people, Japanese people, and like these kids on the Mexico border, they're all like contained, and it's just like targeting someone. And I even linked it to like the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, when this was like the first case of like someone like targeting a certain demographic. And then my inspiration, I said that I never want to see anything like this again in my lifetime, and I hope that by teaching this to my students, like they will feel the same way. And I hope that this serves like those who like can't fight for themselves, because I want my students to fight for those like who can't, because if they're willing to fight, then like we know like something will be done. And I saw this quote by George, who said that those who do not learn history are doomed to repeat it. And I thought that was very powerful. And that is it for my presentation. Thank you, everyone.
All right, excellent snaps. Thank you so much, Martin. And let's go ahead and go with June.
All right. Here I go. Can you guys all see my screen? Got it. Okay. So, sorry, this isn't the way. Okay. So my lesson plan is about the Asian and Asian Pacific Islander hate crimes, specifically towards that. And sorry. So first I'm going to talk about the lesson plan. And so general information about lesson plan, the intended audience for this lesson plan is the fifth graders and like Asian and Asian Pacific Islander students, and they're the underserved groups in the classroom. And this lesson will also give like a different perspective to see for the majority group. And this lesson is part of a unit plan that that'll be conducted 2 to 3 weeks, and it'll be like this specific lesson that I'm going to talk about will be like a 1-day lesson. And this unit plan will be talking about the injustice that has happened throughout the US history on the AAPI people. And prior to this lesson, students would have had the lessons on public service announcement. So students will learn to connect current events, and students will learn ways to contribute to society that is relevant in their community. And students will work and construct the scripts of the PSA throughout the units. And this is my lesson plan, part of it. As you can see, there's a learning goals where students will be able to understand the idea of injustice of segregating people and particular groups of scapegoating others, and how harmful that could be. And here's my standards listed with the social justice standards I've specifically chosen. And there's an objective, and I've constructed with opening, during, and closing and virtual field section written on my lesson plan, which I will go in detail. So my inspiration for the lesson plan was that I've chosen this topic because I believe it is crucial information that students need to learn. And these are like current event that is relevant event that is happening in our society, like that students might be going through at the moment too. And giving the sense of awareness of this counter story of these Asian and Asian Pacific Islander stories can be delivered to students and will support both underlying groups and the majority group of the students. And the key of creating this lesson plan is to inform that the injustice in our society and to provide tools to help mitigate these tensions in our society that's happening around us. And also this will help students to nurture each other and form unity in our community, and our identity should not be factor to be treated wrongfully and blamed upon. And to resolve these problems, people need to find resolution to fundamental of the issues and not scapegoating others, which will not like resolve anything. Some of the guiding and essential questions that have come up as I was forming up this lesson plan were like, why is racial hatred on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders rising as the pandemic prolongs? And like how it has always been, has it always been in our society or around our community? Or why do people scapegoat others? And does scapegoating resolve problems? And what can we do as a community to help reduce tension and reduce injustice against other people? And some of the general structure of the lesson plan is I will have opening activity, which students will go through the Jamboard and share their experience. Like there's 2 questions that will come up with, and it's about describing their experience during coronavirus, the pandemic, and have they ever experienced or they have heard stories about people being mistreated during pandemic. And then after the opening activity, we'll go through a quick PowerPoint slide where it will define about the AAPI hate crimes during pandemic, and how did these crimes have escalated throughout the pandemic, and what might have fueled this growing hatred. And then we'll move on to the video clip, which will have videos about informations on what AAPI hate crimes is and the interviews of these people, the victims of these crimes. And we will have like a discussion with groups or partners, whichever students are more comfortable with, and then we will bring together as a whole class to have a discussion. And then the exit ticket will be about self-assessing themselves with their emotions, where they'll be questioned like, how did you feel about the lesson? And during this lesson, was there any time that you felt sad or angry or uncomfortable? Then this will help me as an educator as well, but also to help the students to self-assess their emotions relating to these topics. And also the takeaway questions would question about would blaming others give resolution to problems? What can we do to help these people? And how can we reduce such tension around us? And then the virtual fieldwork will be constructed with research. So students will go off the class, like off the class time, and research about the AAPI hate crimes or any other Asian hatred in the US history, or cases or events that are relating to these kind of hatreds, and laws that correspond to these events. And some of the resources that I will give are these 2 sites that shows the statistics of the crimes that's happening during pandemic and incidents, like descriptions of incidents and geographical locations of where it has occurred. So, and specifically with the second link, students can go into the website and go through the maps and go figure out where it's concentrated. And students will use these information they have gathered and make a research project out of into a poster format for their final project. And these are the praxis. So this was my mock run for my opening activity where I did the Jamboard. And some of the feedback I've gotten was that they liked the anonymity because it made them feel more comfortable to share, and it was engaging for them. And they have given me that I should maybe clarify some more on questions that I'm giving. And so what I changed was add some more clarity into questions, like where I stated that share experience or stories that you have heard. I've gave more details of what the stories could be, like news and what you have heard or any other source. And students will be given opportunity to verbally share their experience if they feel like, because we had this moment where my colleagues started to talk about their experience as they were typing. And I've also decided to provide more nurturing and connecting with others through allowing them to put hearts or stars next to these post-it notes, for hearts for caring or comfort, and stars to give some if they had same experience for connecting with each other's. So the social justice pedagogy, that the goal that I thought was so sorry. So this lesson plan demonstrates the social justice pedagogy goals, because social justice pedagogy goal is about helping students be aware of injustice and providing them with tools to work toward justice. And I thought my lesson plan fits this goal because it shows the injustice in the current society and what students can do to participate in the working towards their justice. And it introduced a counter story of the Asian and Asian Pacific Islander hate crimes during the pandemic and its injustice of the content. And these hate crimes tend to be not taught in school, as it could be controversial or believe that it might be not be appropriate for students. But however, I strongly believe that some of the students are going through these matters, and it is crucial to build awareness for what each student is going through. And students are also given these tools that they can use to contribute to the society, to work towards justice by they'll be able to analyze their history to what history in the past have done and what can they do to incorporate. And also the tools like PSA, the public service announcement, and sites like Stop AAPI hate.org can help with students to contributing to this kind of social justice. And thank you, that's it.
All right, thank you so much. Let's give snaps. And let's go ahead and go with Tandy.
Okay, hello everyone. Can you all see my screen okay? Okay, awesome, thank you. So I'm going to be talking about my lesson plan, which has to do with food and self-identity. And my name is Tandy. So a quick overview of my lesson plan. The whole point is so my students will learn about their favorite homemade meals and how it relates to their cultural identity, learn from their peers, and utilize oral history to create a research project. My intended audience is third graders, and the lesson time is about 2 to 3 weeks with some flexibility in order to accommodate students and their need to contact family members and so on and so forth. So my main performance task, the goal for the end of the lesson, is to create a classroom anthology that consists of 3 components. The 3 components being the first being the oral history report, which will be their research portion, where they'll orally interview family members, a photo of their selected food, and then the recipe. Another little added on thing that I wanted to do as well was to make like our community cookbook, which has all of the recipes that each of the students share, and it'll be put together so that each student can take it home, and it encourages them to try cooking and eating their classmates' favorite food if possible, for even further kind of inclusivity. My inspiration for this lesson plan is really just learning about our identities is such an empowering experience, and self-identity and cultural diversity is prevalent everywhere, even in something as simple as like the food that we eat. And also I want to give my students the opportunity to share about their cultures through this, communal existence of food, which cultivates empathy and a further deeper understanding of others. And the last thing being othered and having strange food choices, quote unquote strange food choices for lunch left me feeling really alienated when it could have been used as an opportunity for growth that some of our colleagues also talked about during our otherness projects, which I really resonated deeply with. So just a quick overview of my actual lesson plan. Some of the essential questions are like, where does my food come from? How does my food relate to my identity? And what can I learn about my classmates and their cultures through their favorite foods? I'll be doing my virtual fieldwork via a video introduction that I'll show later during my mock lesson portion. Photos of, my favorite food and their favorite food, Jamboard if it's online, poster boards and Post-it notes if it's in person, and several different worksheet templates. And as the opening, which I'll go into more detail in a little bit, I will introduce a video and have discussions about what was seen in the video and what kind of conversations it sparks. And by the end of the opening part of the section, I want to have the students go into 3-person groups and talk about their favorite foods and share stories, and then deciding what food that they'll be using for their project. And their assignment for that first opening portion will be to take a photo of the dish that they want to talk about. But if they can't take a photo, or if it's a little bit difficult for them, then drawing is an option as well. For the during part, it's pretty heavy, but in order to kind of incorporate one of the other portions of the project, I want the students to, we'll focus on a section on just recipes, learning how recipes work and how to create a recipe and have them experience it firsthand so that they're able to properly create recipes to share with everybody else. And also with the oral interviews, I will have worksheets and everything like that, and have a lot of activities for the students to practice with each other. Another thing I really want to strongly emphasize is that the students don't have to use English for their oral interviews, because I know it might not be their comfortable language, especially with their family members. So in order to emphasize that importance, I'll show them a model of my own, wherein I interview my mom and I speak to her in English, Korean, Mandarin, Chinese, and to kind of further some more modalities and things that they can do. And then, by the end of it, I want them to reflect and talk about what they've learned about themselves and what they've been able to learn about others. So just real quick as well, in my mock introduction, I showed this short video on YouTube about Hawaiian food. And I had these 3 questions. What are examples of Hawaiian food? So they, to assess their understanding of the video, how they can connect food with culture, and then what examples of food they eat at home. And improvements are just changing the order of the questions, including my own modeling and sharing my own experiences, and then engaging in further discussion out loud if the students are comfortable. And lastly, my social pedagogy goals are the three standards. As you can see, the first one focusing on understanding about themselves and how rich their own culture is. Second one, focusing on giving space for our students of color and giving them a space to be heard and feeling more empowered by sharing more about their heritage. And then lastly, utilizing oral history as a valid form of research. And that's it. Thank you.
All right, Tandy, thank you so much. And you hit that 5-minute mark very beautifully. All right, let's go ahead and move on to our next speaker, which is Ashley.
Hi, everyone. Strange. When I press share screen, it says Google Doc is not available. Sorry, 1 second. Sorry, Dr. Cupchoy, can you come back to me after the next one? It says I need to change my security settings.
Sure, no worries. Let's go ahead and we'll circle back with you. Let's go ahead and hop with Danny. Danny, you ready to go?
Yeah, let me just get my screen up.
Okay, are the slides up? Fantastic. So I did my lesson plan on gender in children's literature. This is just a picture of the lesson plan itself, but I go into more detail. So the standards that I'm trying to meet are some literacy standards along with justice and diversity standards listed here. And my lesson plan is for my students, or for me and my students, to analyze traditional fairy tales and examples of modern children's short fiction to look for gender stereotypes. And then they will choose one of the fairy tales to rewrite in their own words that subverts the original stereotypes they had identified. So this is the summary of what it's going to look like. The beginning of the lesson is going to be 2 main lessons, an hour each. And then after that, to work on their project, we'll be working in like writer's workshop spaces, like so that they have time to talk with their peers and to myself if they want feedback. The way I intend to run it is to front load them with vocabulary such as social construct and the gender binary, so that they're able to use the correct language when we are identifying those stereotypes. And then we're going to work together to come up with a list of what stereotypes are. And one of my driving questions is going to be, how are gender stereotypes maintained? We'll then move into small groups. I will provide a pre-edited PDF of Grimm's fairy tales, because the PDF itself is very long and not all of them are age appropriate. And they will work together to identify different moments in the story where gender stereotypes are being reinforced. They will then have time to reflect in their reader notebooks. And then for our next class, they are going to go on to Epic Books and try to find an example of a modern short children's fiction that they believe either shows a greater variety of gender expression or challenges traditional stereotypes. If they have a specific book in mind that they can't find on Epic, I would encourage them to come talk to me so that they can choose a read aloud from YouTube, but they aren't just going out to do research in the vast internet. Then once we come back for our second lesson, I will have them watch a read aloud on YouTube of Oliver Button is a Sissy, which is a book about a little boy who likes traditionally girl things and doesn't play with the other boys, and they bully him for it and they call him a sissy. And his parents want him to get exercise, so they want him to go out for a sport, but he doesn't like sports. He wants to do dance, and he enters in a talent show, and his classmates come to see, and he doesn't win the talent show, and he's very sad. But he goes to school the next day, and the graffiti that said Oliver Button is a sissy at the schoolyard now says Oliver Button is a star. And I think that text will really help us look at how these stereotypes are harmful. We'll then move into small groups. They'll share what books they brought with the rest of their group. Then we'll move into whole class discussion where we talk about how what differences they noticed, what differences specifically with gender they noticed, and what they think those gender stereotypes do. So how they think they impact people's lives. And then they'll have time to reflect in their reader notebook. And we will begin working on the rest of that exit ticket, rewriting the fairy tale. So the reason I chose this lesson plan is because I wanted to address like media literacy and structures of oppression in a way that the kids could really understand. So at this point, they're probably all very familiar with children's books because they're in 5th grade. They also have had some sort of experience with their gender assigned at birth at that point. That tends to be the age where gender bullying can get really bad in 5th grade. So that way we can look at something they're familiar with, children's books, as an example of media that is teaching a lesson. And we can talk about structures of oppression that they understand because they can relate to it directly. And I think that it addresses social justice pedagogy because in my standards, it talks about knowing when people are treated unfairly and understanding how that impacts their lives, and then being able to be empathetic and kind to those unlike ourselves. And then this is just the links for my virtual fieldwork resources. The Grimm Brothers text is fairly long, so I would have to edit it. And then this is just a picture of ethic books. So when the kids choose their modern fiction, we can also analyze the visual components of it. Because for the exit ticket, I would like to pair it with an art lesson so that they're able to illustrate their works, and then we can get it professionally bound so that they have that physical artifact of their work. And that's the end of my presentation.
All right, thank you so much, Danny. And we'll go ahead and circle back to Ashley. Ashley, are we ready?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Cupchoy. So thumbs up if you can see my screen properly. Thank you. So my lesson plan is centered on the concept of artivism, specifically artivism, which is art plus activism, addressing racism in America. What you kind of see here is the artist that we're focusing on, Nicholas Smith, who did the Black Panther mural in downtown Disney. It's now moved to a children's hospital, but I think that can be one way to connect to students' prior knowledge. So starting in the top left, my lesson plan generally is for 9th grade English. It's a unit focusing on the African American experience. So we are reading nonfiction text, fiction text, and kind of my purpose of choosing the artivism is to show that activism can take many different forms. And then the virtual fieldwork that you are going to see is an introductory video from Nicholas. Did I say Nicholas Sparks earlier? Nicholas Smith, sorry. Nicholas Smith, and then an interactive art gallery walk that I put together that will be using Google Slides. I was inspired to make this lesson plan just based on the artist himself. I think oftentimes it's really burdensome or hard to talk about racism, and because it's been so constant recently, but I think that Nicholas is able to turn it into a more hopeful piece through his art. And then I also think that it aligns really well with 21st century learning skills in the creativity aspect, and then the lesson plan has a collaboration aspect. So in the bottom left, you can see the outline of activities. It's a 90-minute block period. It starts with a do now, asking students to explain their prior knowledge of the vocabulary that was reviewed in the unit. And then there is a teacher-led introduction to the artist. Students will do the art gallery walk independently and take notes on the student document that is provided for them. And then afterwards, they have the choice of which art piece most intrigues them, and they will write an art analysis paragraph on that after doing some research into the person or the event that is being featured. And then it will end with an individual exit ticket. So I can get to hear their personal opinions about what their takeaway is from the day. It is aligned with social justice goals, especially with the art pieces that I'm going to show you next are focused on really recent events. So for example, the George Floyd's murder and the taking down of Confederate statues in Virginia. And then the goals that it aligns with from the teaching tolerance standards is expressing curiosity about history and lived experience of others, and recognizing and describing the injustice in society. So I put this together based on the prints from Nicholas Smith's website, and the titles are included. So students would view this gallery and they have the closer pictures provided to them on a separate PowerPoint. And then they would choose the one that interests them most, or which one they would want to learn more about. And from this lesson plan project, I learned my learning was twofold. So in the planning, it reminded me to always start with the objective. And then because this is a social justice centered plan, I really wanted to check my implicit bias. So one of the things that I did for differentiation or to help support our students with special needs or accommodations is I provided the links to credible sources for them to research further about the person or event that the art piece is about. And I wanted to make sure that the pieces that the websites and the links, articles that I provided weren't biased, leaning one far to one side or to the other. And then from our practice, our run-throughs in class, I got good feedback from Braden and Claudia that the student document that I asked students to fill out during the lesson needs to align with the PowerPoint. So I made that a lot more explicit. And then they also gave me the feedback to label art pieces. I really enjoyed this kind of practice just because in the actual classroom, you don't really see a lot of support in lesson creation. Rather, it's a lot of like observation and reactive feedback. So I think it was helpful to have both the planning support and also the reactive feedback during the run-throughs. Otherwise, that is all, and thank you, everyone.
All right, excellent snaps. Thank you so much, Ashley. And we're moving on to Jordan.
Oops. Okay, hello everyone. My name is Jordan Vargas, and this is my lesson plan, Music as a Tool for Healing. It is geared for a middle school orchestra or choir program. So this lesson plan, the objectives are for students to recognize that life is easier for some people and harder for others based on who they are and where they were born. And for them to be able to create their own definition of privilege and how it can relate to music, because privilege, when you first think about it, it's racial based and it's based on gender and other identities, but it's not talked about a lot in the performing arts because there are privilege and things that you find as a performing artist. And so the three main ideas of privilege is, or like of the lesson plan is privilege, identity, and empowerment. So they're given a reminder of classroom norms that this is a brave to safe space, and this will take place in the middle of the year where they all have built a respect and compassion and empathy for each other. And they'll also be encouraged when in one of their activities to find songs with empowering messages and empowering words. So, and then here's a rubric and a screenshot of my lesson plan. So this is a quote of context that they'll be given by Alan G. Johnson from our Reading for Social Diversity and Social Justice book. And this will give them the pre-context before they fill out a KWL chart for our lesson on privilege. And so this is the opening activity. This is music privileges for sale. And so they'll be set in a group. They decide which privilege statements are important to them and why, and which ones they would like to buy. So they're given fictional money. I say this group is given $300, this group is given $500. They start to recognize those biases, and each privilege would cost $100. And some of these are all of these are related to music somehow. They talk about how disabilities or handicaps can be negatively affected in performances, and how gender and racial identity can affect the roles you're given, and how financial burdens in a school or in your general life can affect you as a performer and a musician. So then the secondary activity is a musical scavenger hunt. So they do the history and research of who, what, where, when, and why of these Black female composers. And they make inferences on what the musical artist, lyricist, and composer's voice and intention was in these songs. These are all very powerful anthems: Strange Fruit, Black Like Me, and A Perfect Way to Die. These anthems, I want students to leave the lesson going, wow, I'm impacted, or I am emotionally moved, because music is a form of healing. And if they don't relate to this story, they can at least be impacted to want to do something or be the change and representation we want in the industry. Come on. Oops. Okay, so then this is the empowerment activity. The empowerment words that they would be given are power, respect, brave, confidence, and unique. And they'll be challenged to find a song using YouTube, Spotify, and musical encyclopedias with these words by a musical artist with their similar gender, ethnic, or racial identity. So then that this song could be empowerment to them. I want them to have this song to boost their morale, to get them out of emotional state of mind, and just kind of pick themselves up, because music can be a form of coping as well. And some examples are I Have Confidence from Sound of Music, and then we have RESPECT by Aretha Franklin. So those are some examples of songs they can find through this empowerment activity. So this is the virtual fieldwork. We have virtual museums on Google Slides. So each little arrow is a different room that will lead them to different boxes and different representations of musicians of color and identities, and also access to YouTube and our privilege activity. So the inspirations and how to teach this, it's appreciating what we have. I know that my parents and my grandparents always said, I cried because I had no shoes, but then I met a guy who had no feet, by Gandhi. And it just kind of made me always like recognize that, oh yes, I am very blessed to have what I have. And with privilege, we tend to forget about how blessed we are to have the things that we do. And so then, like I mentioned before, privilege is not just about racial and sexual identity. There is privilege in the music industry. We see it in producing and in the Grammys, and how there's a lack of representation of people of color. It's getting there and it's building up, but we still want to see that more change. And then this, the privilege for sale was an idea from the Safety Zone Project and Brave to Safe Spaces. I feel like when you teach this lesson, since they're middle schoolers, you can approach it with a more of a deeper and focused understanding, but you have to teach it with acceptance, empathy, and respect. And so the mock lesson that we did, this is some example of the KWL chart, and how that there are some music privileges they didn't know were privileges. And some of the favorite privileges that people bought were, I'm not teased in school for being in my music program. I feel seen and supported, and I'm not worried about being casted because of my race or ethnicity. So then these are the social justice standards that were identified and the national music standards addressed. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks, Jordan. Snaps. And let's move on to our next presenter, which is Stephanie.
Okay. Okay. Hi, my name is Stephanie, and today my lesson plan is focused around learning about my culture. So it's a 4th grade lesson plan, and it's part of a larger unit plan on exploring cultural diversity. So my inspiration for this piece was I believe that students should have a strong connection to their culture and be proud of their identity. So going off of that, I want students to be proud of themselves and willing to share more about themselves, because I know there is a lot of hesitancy for students to share their culture that isn't something related to the American culture. So my goal is for this to lay the foundation for others to start being more tolerant of other cultures, because I believe that also starts in the classroom. So my lesson objective is that by the end of this lesson, students will be able to report at least 3 traditions on their own, culture and life, and present it to the class using Jamboard and a written reflection. So my overview for the lesson. So how it will open is students will watch a video on culture and tradition and answer questions on Edpuzzle, which will be my virtual fieldwork. And the link is right down below. So students will then be able to think, pair, share with a partner about their traditions that they have. So this allows students to watch the video. It is a little bit of a longer video, so it's about 9.5 minutes. And so then they'll have that opportunity to kind of debrief with a partner and talk about what culture means to them and what kind of traditions that they have. So then students will get a Chromebook and they'll get to write on a Jamboard their traditions that they have. And then they can share their traditions with the class if they like. It's completely up to them, and kind of explain more what the meaning behind it is, because in a Jamboard you only get so many characters. And it's kind of hard to talk. Sometimes it is really fun to share what some of the traditions that we have. And after they write their traditions down, students will have the opportunity to compare and contrast their tradition with their peers. So as we know, Jamboard has, you can see everybody's answers and it's anonymous. So they'll have the opportunity to look at them and see if one is similar to theirs or different. So some people may have the same tradition of having dinner every week with their family, so they can start talking to their friends about that tradition. And after that, they will write about what they talked about that day. So they'll write a reflective paragraph describing their tradition and then one of their classmates' traditions as well. So they get the opportunity to compare and contrast to see what similarities they have and what differences they have with their classmates. So how this will be taught, it'll be taught, it is part of a bigger unit plan about cultural diversity. It leads into a big presentation at the very end, and it's an opening activity to a larger discussion about cultures and identities. So the standards that I have, I do have an ELA standard about reporting on topics, which will be their written reflection and how I will assess them. And there's also the social justice standard of talking about their personal identities and being able to talk about themselves and their family. So for my Jamboard activity, what I had my group do is they wrote down their traditions. So I showed a little bit of the video and had them write down their traditions. So this wasn't a relatively easy activity to do, especially as an opening activity. They just got to write down whatever they're thinking and put it on the Jamboard. But what I would change about it is being a little bit more descriptive of what I'm looking for. So in my head, I was thinking, okay, they'll write down specific traditions that they have and put on the sticky note. Of course, whatever you're thinking isn't always translated to the student. So they wrote down Christmas, but I would probably have them elaborate more next time and say what kind of traditions. Like I know for me, we watch Polar Express every Christmas Eve. So having sort of that specific example, and going off of that, I would give them a specific example of what I just said. So that way students know what I'm looking for, and it's a lot easier to model after the teacher as well. And that is all for my presentation. Thank you.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much, Stephanie. Snaps. And let's go with Kiani. You are our next presenter, and then followed by Braden.
Okay, can you guys see it? Oh, okay. So my topic is inclusion and diversity in the classroom. It's going to be dedicated to a 4th grade class. So my inspiration was also the Otherness Project, how everyone at some point has felt excluded from the dominant group. And that's why I wanted to focus on inclusion and embracing similarities and differences and how every student is unique. I feel like, especially at a young age, students want to fit in, they want to blend into the main group. And so I wanted to make a lesson to show how being unique is a beautiful thing. So for the introduction, we're going to start by doing a read out loud by Sonia Sotomayor. It's called Just Ask, and it's a book about children with differences that make them unique. And then we're going to discuss the book after watching the read out loud. And the book basically has like a variety of different children, like one of them was dyslexic, one of them was in a wheelchair, and just how all of their differences make them unique and special. So then after that, students will find a partner, and they're going to be making a Venn diagram. The center is going to be the similarities between them and their partner. And then each side is going to be one student and then one student. And then they could do like hair color, age, how many pets, what grade, because the grade would be like a similarity. And then after that, each pair is going to share one interesting or cool difference they found that they think makes their partner unique. So they're going to share that with the class. And then after, we are going to jump into what is diversity, what is inclusion. I'm going to ask the students for background knowledge, see what they know on the terms. Then after that, we're going to watch a YouTube video. It's called Diversity and Social Inclusion. And then the video goes over the beauty of diversity and being unique. It goes over the definitions, examples of social inclusion. And then after that, students will be making a Jamboard to add points that they learned from the video. They can add in the terms they learned, how one of the students in the video was discriminated against and how he might have felt. And they can add in different ways that they can be more inclusive themselves. And then in that video, it mentioned culture. And so then we are going to be ending the lesson with a culture project. We're going to be going over what is culture. So students will be making a PowerPoint or poster board of their choosing, and then they get to basically share their culture with the class. They can bring in a snack or a dish if they choose. And then I feel like this is a way to help empower students to embrace their culture. And then the class learns to be respectful and appreciate what makes them all different. I would make a presentation first. For example, I'm Mexican. I could bring in like conchas or something to just show the class how they would be doing it. And then to end the lesson, they are all going to be doing a reflection. Students will write a short reflection that will include a compliment on a peer's culture presentation, what they liked about it and why, something new they learned about a culture, and any similarities between their presentation and another peer's. And then, so social justice pedagogy is they will be learning to embrace similarities and differences of their peers in a positive way. It's just teaching them how to be respectful of the diversity, how everyone is different. And then the time frame for this, I was thinking a week-long lesson. So the first day will be for similarities and differences. The second day will be diversity and inclusion. And the second 2 to 3 days will be for the culture project and reflection. And then in the mock trial, they actually helped me with some of my spelling mistakes. And I believe Allie and Emily actually inspired me to add in another video to basically go over the definitions because I didn't have that previously. And I had originally set it up for a 3rd grade class, but then I switched it to 4th grade to go along with the standards better. And yeah.
All right, snaps. Thank you so much, Kiani. And finally, last but not least, Braden.
All right, can everybody see my screen okay? Perfect. Okay, so my lesson plan was on the class struggle of the French Revolution. So description, how it is taught. The topic is the class struggle of the French Revolution. It is designed for a 10th grade history and social studies class, and it is made for a 100-minute class. My high school did block schedule, so it's the type of class that I'm most familiar with, so I arranged it around that. There's 3 parts of the lesson: the virtual fieldwork, which is 50 minutes, a presentation on how the estate system worked, why and how the lower classes rose up in rebellion against the monarchy, and the lessons from the French Revolution, which is 15 to 20 minutes, and then a group project, which is 30 to 35 minutes. And on the right side is a screenshot of the student-facing lesson plan. For the virtual fieldwork and the presentation, the virtual fieldwork is a 2-part YouTube video that gives a brief overview of the French Revolution. Periodically throughout the video, the teacher or myself would pause the video to point out various instances of class struggle during the revolution. And then after each part of the video, the class would engage in a discussion in which they share what they learned about the French Revolution, particularly how it represents class struggle. Here's a couple screenshots from that video on the right side. For the presentation, the teacher will give a presentation on how the estate system worked, why and how the lower classes rose in rebellion against the monarchy, and then lessons from the French Revolution. For the group project, students will present on an event from the French Revolution that demonstrates one of the following: either the lower classes rising up against those in power, like the storming of the Bastille, how the lower classes were neglected by those in power, such as food shortages, while aristocrats and the monarchy partied, or another aspect of class struggle that the student can decide on and then present to the teacher as long as it is approved. The students can present via Google Slides, PowerPoint, poster board, Canva brochure, etc. One of the pieces of feedback that I got when I presented this aspect of my lesson plan to Claudia and Ashley was offering students a wider variety of ways to present instead of just Google Slides, PowerPoint, poster board, etc. So something Claudia mentioned was like a reenactment or some sort of like short play. For the groups, there will be groups of 4, and each member of the group will have a role. So there will be a leader who will make sure that everyone stays on task, an illustrator whose main goal will be to provide graphics, the writer who will actually physically write out the information, and the timekeeper who makes sure that the students finish in the time allotted. While every student does have their own distinct or unique role in the group, they will be responsible for contributing to all aspects of the project. For the presentation, students will have 5 to 10 minutes to present during the next class. So my inspiration for this lesson project, I wanted to find a historical period to cover for this lesson since I will be teaching history at one point. I've always found the French Revolution incredibly fascinating. It covers a unique aspect of social justice, which is class struggle, and it's a very relevant issue today, so covering one of the most influential and important revolutions felt appropriate. I believe it's important for students to learn that everyone has power, regardless of where they are on the social or political ladder. And the main lesson of the French Revolution is that even kings need to answer the people, and that power only exists where people allow it to. So how this lesson achieves social justice pedagogy goals, it covers the standard justice 9 to 12.15, which is I can identify figures, groups, events, and a variety of strategies and philosophies relevant to the history of social justice around the world. So for example, sorry, I blanked for a second. So it teaches students about one of the most influential revolutions in history. And by examining the French Revolution through the lens of social justice, students can learn that everyone has a voice. Regardless of their place in society or the political power they hold, people can enact change in their world. I've included a couple pictures on the side. There's a march during the George Floyd protests that happened last year. And then the photo on the bottom is West and East Berlin as the Berlin Wall is coming down, or the months prior to it coming down. A number of the lessons from the French Revolution can be applied today to reform and improve our society, like I just showed 2 examples of. And chief among them is that anything is possible if enough people are committed to it. And that is my presentation. Thank you.
All right, snaps. Excellent. Thank you so much, Braden. Okay, what I'd like to do now, let me go ahead and open it up. And I'd like to just field the class for a couple comments, feedback, thoughts about your peers' lesson plan presentations for today. I'm wondering if we have a few comments to go ahead and just kind of chime in really quickly. Who would like to share? Okay, Esther, why don't you start us off?
This is a shout out to Tandy. I loved her lesson about food and culture. I think that's really important. And I think it gives students such an easy way to share just a little bit about their culture. So I thought that was a really interesting lesson that I hope you get to do one day.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much, Esther. And then anybody else want to chime in? Thank you, Snaps. Okay, we'll go with Claudia.
I thought the elementary lessons were really powerful and impacting because you were recognizing your students as young people, going to become adults at one day. So you were treating them with the respect and helping them have the skills that they need as they grow older. So I was really impressed by a lot of the elementary lessons.
Mm-hmm. Right, excellent. Thank you, Snaps, Claudia. And we'll take one more comment. One more comment. We're so shy today. What happened? Come on, thoughts. Maybe something that you found interesting or connected. Okay, Monica and then Marek.
I just thought how great it was that most of our lesson plans can be really adjusted for class size, class grade, and even subject at times. And I thought it was really great because I hope one day I can incorporate a lot of the things that we did during these presentations in my classroom.
Excellent. Thank you, Monica, for sharing. And then Marek?
I just wanted to counter a little bit to what Claudia said. She was impressed with what we elementary school teachers did. I was impressed by what you guys did, high schoolers. So I was just totally blown away. I loved it. And just wanted a big shout out to JU, and she was very nervous and she did very, very well. You did, JU. Yay.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much. Any other final comments as we're going to wrap up? Well, folks, I want to thank each and every one of you again for your contributions, right? Like formally as we're recording this, but you know, hopefully over this 9-week course, right, you had an opportunity to kind of see the process of pedagogy, right? That it's not easy, right, to figure out, right, how do we kind of reimagine our curriculum spaces, right, especially as teachers when we're asked that we need to teach in a particular way, right, we need to teach the subject matter in a particular way, and oftentimes these standard forms end up, you know, excluding, maybe not intentionally, right, but we've seen a lot of exclusion or unbalance, right, and then therefore a lot of students end up not connecting, right, with it. We've talked about this, you know, not today, right, but in this course, we've talked about many of us having experiences where we really didn't connect to what was being taught to us, right, or some of you even said at one point, you know, why didn't I learn this sooner? Right? Why am I learning this now? Right? You know, while I'm in college, right? Or when I'm about to teach, right? And so part of this is that process, right? Of understanding, right? How knowledge production is created, but also not only as yourselves as forthcoming teachers, right? But also when you're in the classroom, right? Understanding that your students are also contributors to knowledge. So it's not just knowledge being impressed and pushed on to the students, right? But also you are, as you know, getting them engaged in producing this knowledge. And just like, you know, I know we mentioned Tandy, right? You know, and other folks, you know, oral history pieces or doing interviews, right? Or, you know, group work, you know, as social agents, right? In the process, et cetera, reflections, you know, all these different forms, right, of engaging students, right? These are all the tools that we as educators have to continually get our students to see that they are very much an active participant in their community, right, in their home, no matter the age, right, no matter the age. And so with that being said, I want to thank all of you for joining us, right, for our little humble, right, presentation. This is 570, and this was just wonderful to see, you know, during the summer of 2021, right, to see all of the amazing work by these forthcoming educators who are about to step into the field. So we thank everybody for joining us.